This is the second video for interwar period between the fires, between World War I and World War II. So when we left off with video 1, the Americans had just come to the rescue in the 1920s, in 1924, to help the Germans pay their reparations towards the French. But there's trouble ahead as the U.S. economy slows down due to the uneven distribution of wealth, overproduction by business and agriculture, which means that the businesses are paying so much money to create stuff and people aren't buying enough that businesses start to fail, and stocks on the U.S. stock market are starting to sell for way more than they're worth, which means when the stock market crashes on October 29th, called Black Tuesday, we're going to see the beginning of the Great Depression in the United States. Now, it really affects the United States, but remember that the Great Depression is not just, because we're a global economy, it's not just a U.S. event. The Great Depression becomes a global Great Depression. So in the United States especially, the collapsed economy leads to business failures and bank closures. We see runs on the banks as people try and grab their money and hide it under their mattress, thinking that's going to be a lot safer. And so the collapse of the economy is felt around the world, especially in Germany, and leads to the Great Depression. We end up seeing migrant parents who are forced to move. This is a very famous photograph from the U.S. Great Depression. We start to see people running on banks, trying to get all of their money out. People are forced to sell their houses because they can't pay their mortgages. And so everything must be sold as they end up living on the road and trying to move wherever they think they can find a job. We start to see soup kitchens being built in the United States to help provide people with a meal when they're unemployed. And eventually we get a new president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who is going to create a program called the New Deal, which is going to reform the American economic system and help restore faith in democracy. Now that's a basic overview. You'll learn more about the New Deal in U.S. history next year. But it does help the United States move its way out of the Great Depression, although the biggest thing, of course, is going to be World War II that brings the United States out of the Great Depression. Overseas, Italy and Germany are also really struggling with the Great Depression, and the population of both countries is going to start to blame the Treaty of Versailles and the weak leadership of the Weimar Republic and the king in Italy for all of their hardships. Remember, there's that picture of the kids using money as playing blocks, essentially. So we start to see what is called the rise of fascism. Fascism is a form of government that promotes extreme nationalism and militarism combined. So the idea of everybody's going to be a member of the military, and the military is the most important, and your love of country and culture is most important as well. From fascism, we see a political party known as the Nazis emerge. The Nazis in Germany believe they have to overturn the Treaty of Versailles and defeat communism. Now, when you think about it, communism, this is a political spectrum. The United States usually falls here in the middle between these two dots, liberalism and conservatism. Having a monarchy is a little bit more conservative. Nazism is the one step even more conservative, and then complete fascism is over on the right wing in a form of there's one person in control, it's a dictatorship, and your life is entirely governed. Every single part of your life is entirely governed by that one dictator. On the other side, you have socialism, where, as you learned about with Engels and the Industrial Revolution and all of that, socialism is where you share your resources and the government is then going to help pool resources together so that way they can provide things for everybody. Communism is everybody is equal, which we know, of course, works well on paper but not in practice. And then, of course, you have anarchism, where there's just lawlessness. So Nazism is over here to the right. Communism is over here to the left. Another way to look at it is economically along the horizontal line between socialism and capitalism, and then totalitarianism and individualism are on the vertical line. Totalitarianism is where your entire life is controlled, and individualism is where you're free to do whatever you want. So you can kind of see where people stand. Of course, we have Franklin Roosevelt, who is a little bit towards socialism and a little bit towards totalitarianism, but not so much. Capitalism over here, of course, we have President Ronald Reagan, President Washington, President Jefferson, Patrick Henry, Benjamin Franklin, President George W. Bush, Bill Clinton. And then, of course, we have our favorites, Adolf Hitler, up here towards totalitarianism and over on the socialism side. We have Lenin over here as well, and then Stalin is much more of a totalitarian and socialism leading into communism. And then, of course, Karl Marx is down here with socialism and individualism as well. So just kind of an idea of where everybody stands. So in Italy, we're going to see that Benito Mussolini takes control and vows to rebuild the economy and the armed forces. He is going to ban democracy in Italy and only allow fascist doctrines. And we will look at Mr. Mussolini a little bit more in a minute. In Germany, Adolf Hitler is going to turn Germany into a totalitarian state. He has an extreme hatred of the Jewish population and believes in firm anti-Semitism and introduces that as a key part of the Nazi ideology, leading to blaming the Jews as scapegoats for all of Germany's problems, especially the economic problems. And that is going to lead into, of course, the ideas of the Holocaust and World War II as Hitler tries to increase the Nazi state and what he calls the Third German Empire or the Third Reich. And we will look at those dictators in a moment. So looking at all of our totalitarian leaders, how you would want to take notes for this. Of course, we have Stalin over here, we have Hitler, and then we have Mussolini in the middle, and then the two on the left are Tojo and then Emperor Hirohito of Japan. So I would take notes by making yourself a chart like this, Stalin, Mussolini, Hitler, and then Tojo and Hirohito combined at the top, and then in your rows, country, title, and political party, and then political policies, economic policies, and social policies. Remember that you can pause the video so that way you can make this chart for yourself. I would use a full sheet of paper, and then of course you can restart the video once you're done. So Mr. Stalin is from the Soviet Union. He is of the Communist Party. Remember that within the Soviet Union, formerly Russia, there is only the Communist Party now. His title is, of course, the General Secretary of the Communist Party. And he is also known as the Man of Steel. Stalin is a name based off of the word for steel in Russian. Mr. Stalin is an atheist. He does not believe in a god or the Russian Orthodox Church. He is also a socialist, believing that the means of production are owned by the public, or in his case, the government, and operated by the good of all. He is going to combine that with totalitarianism, which means that the government owns everything and is going to operate it on behalf of the people, and the people are merely the workers within it. Economic policy, Joseph Stalin is going to create what is called a command economy, where the government officials make all of the economic decisions. So you as an individual person cannot even own a bakery within the Soviet Union. The government owns the bakery and you are just simply the baker within it. Stalin also creates 5-year plans, which are structured plans to help industrialize Russia, because remember, Russia had almost never industrialized or had struggled with industrialization while other countries in Europe were doing so. And he's going to create farming collectives where he creates all of these farms that then the citizens are forced to live and work on, and everything that they produce is given back to the government to then redistribute to the population, rather than the farm workers, owning and selling to the government or selling to other people. Socially, he is going to provide a new elite through the high-ranking Communist Party officials, or what are called the Politburo. For the country, the United Soviet Union is going to have free education. They're going to have medical care, daycare, public housing, and transportation provided, and women actually see a lot of equality within the Soviet Union. So in some senses, Stalin actually has essentially a good side. However, within that free education part, you're going to see that education is very, you are a member of the Communist Party, you will support the Communist Party, and those are the only ideas that you are allowed to have. You're not allowed to believe in democracy. And of course, with the medical care and the public housing, you might have a half-decent house, but it's most likely an apartment in a cement block complex. You might have electricity for a certain number of hours a day and water for a certain number of hours a day. Your medical care might be substandard compared to what a capitalist country might offer, but of course the government pays for it, so there are pros and cons of each. So that's Stalin. In Italy, we see the rise of Benito Mussolini. His political party is the Fascists. He calls himself Il Duce, which means the prime minister, and then eventually he becomes the dictator of Italy once he takes over and gets rid of the king, who was, of course, Victor Emmanuel. His philosophy, he is extremely nationalistic. He is anti-socialist. He is anti-individualist, so he's in the totalitarian idea. And he believes that the citizen's duty is to the state. And so everything you do is for the benefit of the state. Economic, he's going to create a corporate state where the business leaders and government officials are in control of production. So it's not quite to the extent of Stalin's idea, but it is government and business leaders are in control. And of course, he, as dictator, is going to tell the business leaders what he thinks, and they'd better do it. Socially, Mussolini is interesting in that he wants women to have lots of children and produce soldiers for the state. So women are expected to be mothers, not workers, so they can focus on raising children to be good Italians and good soldiers for Italy in the future. Adolf Hitler, of course, from Germany. His political party is the Nazi Party, which is officially known as the National Socialist German Workers' Party. They are a fascist party. His title, of course, is Der Führer, or Chancellor or Dictator of Germany. Hitler's philosophy is extremely nationalistic, extremely anti-Semitic, so the Jews are blamed for the problems in Germany, and of course then they're going to be run out of Germany at first, and then when no other country will take the Jews from Germany, he will start his process of the Holocaust. And he wants to build up the Aryan race as the master race, so there's a lot of focus on white supremacy. Of course, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed is the model Aryan, but of course Hitler did not have either of those, and so he still considers himself part of the Aryan race, and it means you have no Jewish heritage. For policies for Hitler, economic, he's going to create large public work projects to create more jobs, which is very interesting because FDR was doing the same thing, just in a different way within the United States. Congress is going to pass all of FDR's policies, whereas Hitler passes his own policies. He is going to have the state controlling business and labor to an extent that is different from the United States. FDR does not do that. But it does mean that things like the Autobahn are going to be built by Hitler, and the large public works project, which is the large German highway that you can drive like 125 miles an hour on because it's so straight and so well built. And of course that's preparing for war in the future. Socially, there's a lot of racism, anti-Semitism. The Jews start to become scapegoats, and there are all the laws against them. He creates the Hitler Youth, which is kind of his version of the racist version of the Boy Scouts, where the youth learn how to be proper little anti-Semitic youth within the German Nazi state. Women are really limited with what jobs they can do, and they're expected to, like Mussolini, produce children for the state. And of course, Hitler creates the SS, or the secret police, to enforce all of the laws that are created. Over in Japan, Hideki Tojo is going to be the wartime prime minister. He's called the Razor. And Hirohito is the emperor, who is ruling under somewhat of a divine right or divine belief, similar to our absolute empires. But of course, Japan has somewhat more of a constitutional monarchy at this point because they do have a prime minister and a parliament in Japan. Their philosophies are, and this is especially Tojo, which kind of then rubs off on Hirohito, militarism, revival of the traditional Japanese warrior, and lots of ideas from the samurai. They also believe in the cult of the emperor, that the emperor is a divine being. Usually the emperor would not speak within meetings with other members of the government, and they just kind of had to, figure out from his poker face whether he was liking their ideas or not liking their ideas. So it's kind of an interesting system compared to what the United States had for a government. Economically, their focus is to gain colonies for the industrialization of Japan. Their factories are producing, they're trying to build up their navy and air force and army, and so they want coal, especially from areas like Manchuria that they're going to attack in Korea. They're going to attack Vietnam to try and get rubber, and take control of Indochina, which is of course Vietnam at this point, and force it to become part of their sphere of influence. In Japan, women had few rights. There was absolute obedience to the state enforced by the military, and they really opposed a lot of Western ideas. They took a lot of military ideas from the West, but they did not believe in a lot of the social ideas of the West, like the Roaring Twenties or anything like that. So you should have your chart filled out of all of the leaders that emerged during the 1920s and 30s in the world. And now I'd like you to pick